Hey everybody, Scott here reporting from Nicaragua. Today we're going to be doing a special extra episode to explain a little bit about time zones here in Nicaragua, and for those of you in North America to understand a little bit more about how your time works up there, because the time zones are... Oh, yeah, I was going to be on the show. She's going to say hello. Hola! And you guys have your time zones are switching tonight, or you're leaving daylight savings time or leaving summertime and going back to normal. What does that mean? We're going to get to that right after the bump. Okay, so if you're from North America, you are familiar that you have this time shift wherein you spring forward and set your clocks forward in the spring, in March, and in November you set your clocks back. That is happening tonight, the night of the, we call it the night of the 4th, but it's actually the early morning of the 5th. So November 5th, Sunday, it's always on a Sunday, at 2 o'clock. When you hit 2 o'clock the first time, the clock is going to set back to 1 o'clock and go back to 2 o'clock again. So it happens twice. I don't know how law enforcement and things like that deal with this problem, because you're like, it happened at 1:30. You're like, which 1:30? I don't know how you, like, how do people track that? I have no idea. So, that being said, this is happening tonight. So that is where we are. So it's a point of interest because while the U.S. is very adamant, more than any other country, about this, a lot of the world, especially down here in Latin America, we don't do that. We don't honor that at all, and Nicaragua is completely on its own normal time. So here, we are on Central America time. That means that we are the same time, north-south, same longitude as the center of the United States. That is the Chicago, Houston, Dallas kind of band that you know as Central Standard Time. That time zone here is the same year-round. In the United States, for 7 to 8 months of the year, you don't honor your actual time. That's where it's weird. It's not half and half, and it's not the majority is the actual time. It is that the majority is summertime, which is very confusing. So what happens now in November is you're returning to normal time. In March, you will go to summertime, as the rest of the world calls it, or daylight savings time, as the United States calls it, the same thing, and you shift by 1 hour. What that means, so the reference here is Nicaragua. That's where I'm recording from, and presumably you're watching my show because you're interested in how the time zones work here. We don't change. So to us, the United States shifts an hour. What's interesting here, growing up or living in Nicaragua, at noon the sun is overhead. But in the United States, the sun is not overhead. It is off by an hour most of the year. So even though we're taught that noon refers to when the sun is overhead, technically that means noon isn't at 12 o'clock. The things that we're taught about time are just wrong in the U.S. because they've made it too complex for anyone to reasonably discuss. It's kind of crazy. So, when you go to summertime in March, what that means is that here in Nicaragua, we end up being the same time as people who are in Denver, people who are in Utah, Salt Lake City, that portion of the country, what you call mountain time. But it is not that Central America becomes the same as mountain time. Mountain time is always mountain time, and is an hour off from Central America. It is that the people who live where it should be mountain time, Utah, Denver, and that area, they shift to honoring Central Time instead of mountain time, but no one wants to admit how dumb that is. So instead of calling it Central Standard Time, which is another way to say it, they call it Mountain Daylight Time to kind of hide from normal people what they've done, even though anyone thinking about it automatically knows that they're off by an hour, and slapping a name on it should not confuse people. Yet it does a pretty good job of marketing to make people completely oblivious to what's actually happening. It's unbelievable working internationally, dealing with Americans who don't know what their own time is. They don't know how to tell you what time zone they're in, because there are parts of, Central Standard Time is still Central Standard Time. Mountain Standard Time is still Mountain. People will be like, I'm Mountain Standard Time. You're like, that would be an hour ago, right? You're off by an hour. Central Time here is always Central Time, and we line up with Central Standard. So we line up with Central Standard or Mountain Daylight. So whichever one you're in, that is the same as us. So if you're in Central Daylight, that means you go an hour earlier than us. So everything happens here an hour later. So that's how it works here. It's very straightforward here on a beautiful rainy day in Nicaragua. One of the things that's awesome about being here in the more developed world is that we have this much more advanced usage of time where it's just stable all the time. It's hard to believe that there's any place left in the world that is so backwards as to still have their time shifting in that way. Both that they think that that's an effective manipulation of people, as if people live by the clock in that way. And what's really odd is they make excuses like, well, farmers need it. And you're like, farmers get up with the sun. They don't even check their clock. Like, it doesn't work that way. Chickens, cows, whatever thing they need to do, the sunlight, that's what determines their day. The time you put on things, it actually causes problems for farmers because now one day they do things at this time, the next day their life has to adjust to a different time for other people, like government offices they have to interact with. It's really problematic. There is literally no winner in the system, but it causes medical issues, it causes business issues, it causes the economic impact of it is crazy big. And so most of the world doesn't honor that, and the entire world considers it bonkers crazy. And I love being able to live in a place where it never crosses anyone's mind to entertain doing something like that. But that is how it interfaces and how we see it adjusting in the U.S. So if you are east of us in Eastern Time or same as us in Central Time, you shift away from us. And if you're in the West, Mountain or Pacific Time, you shift towards us. So different parts of the year, we are more aligned with different areas. But we're always pretty close to the middle of the U.S. on average throughout the year, which is one of the nice things about Nicaragua is that it's so easy to work with North America because we're just in the we're as average in the middle of the country as can be. Half the time we're slightly east, half the time we're slightly west. We're right down the middle. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the regular vlog update tomorrow.